Well, we've come to the end of 2020, the most memorable year of my life, at least among the ones that I can remember. And hello, everybody. This is the Pick Six Podcast. Sam McKewon, along with Dirk Chatelain, joins us again. Happy to see that. And Evan Bland down there in at least my bottom left-hand corner. And we hope that you're out there enjoying the holidays and ready to have a safe but fun New Year's. It is the end of 2020, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today, just the impact it had on sports in Nebraska and America. We'll talk a little bit about Nebraska football, too, more off-season chatter. We're going to save the big questions, big picture questions, until we know exactly who is returning to this team and who isn't, but the seniors are starting to make that progress through things. We'll talk a little bit of hoops. We'll talk also just a little bit of college football playoff and how much of a contrast that is to what Nebraska went through when it won its national championship, specifically the 1970 national championship, which featured one of the wildest days in college football history and resulted in Nebraska winning the only national championship that year that really counted, because the other one that was given out that year by the coaches was given out before the end of the polls. It was given out at the end of the regular season. So Nebraska shared the national title that year with a team that actually didn't deserve to win half of it. But anyway, we'll get to that in a moment. I want to thank everybody. Happy New Year to both you guys. Early Happy New Year. It's December 30th. But the next time we'll be talking to everybody will be in 2021. Want to thank our sponsor for all of 2020, Team Schwalbach. The Schwalbach Agency is a family-owned all-state insurance agency with 4 licensed insurance pros, saving thousands of Nebraska Husker fans money. They sell homeowner, auto, life, and flood insurance across Nebraska, and they also insure all the big boy toys. Motorcycles, boats, RVs, and off-road vehicles. You can reach them at 402-590-5200. Daryl Schwalbach, Kyle Schwalbach, Nancy Mostek, or Kyle Murdoch. They will save you a lot of money. They have free, no-obligation insurance reviews and quotes. Again, you can reach them at 402-590-5200 or www.nebraskaallstate.com. That's www.nebraskaallstate.com. Thank you to Team Schwalbach. Okay, I'm going to shut up for a minute and say 2020, go. Sports, 2020, pandemic, coronavirus, election. All kinds of stuff over the summer, too. Go.
I just reflecting on on this year that nobody's going to want to remember much. I guess what stood out to me about sports is, and I think it is reflected in the television ratings. I think it's reflected in the sort of the end of season lists of big moments. Sports just kind of lost its buzz. It just lost its. It certainly lost its significance. But I think it was in large part due to the distractions and events off the field, and then in addition to that, the lack of crowds, I think, was a big part of it. It's just these things are hard. It's hard to persuade yourself watching a game that it is a big deal when nobody is there, and I think that that's maybe the biggest. Thing that I'll take away is just the importance of environment, of atmosphere, of just that buzz. It almost reminds you of why you do this. It's so you can get that energy from a crowd. And I think you saw it, when Creighton won the Big East in downtown Omaha. I mean, that place was electric. I think you saw it, in the Chiefs playoffs games at the start of the year. And then March comes and you didn't see it anymore. And I just felt like everything that happened after that had was just watered down because there was nobody there. I mean, the Dodgers had an amazing run. I didn't feel any of it. The NFL had some incredible games. I didn't feel any of it. It just, very few things were memorable to me in 2020, and I think maybe that's the thing that stands out most. Is 5 years when I look back at this stuff, I'm going to say, man, sports was almost non-existent, even though the events were happening.
I think the most watched thing sports related after the pandemic began was maybe the first or the last episode of The Last Dance. Still. Well, there's been a couple NFL games. I shouldn't say that. There's been a couple NFL games. The Chiefs were involved, but yeah, The Last Dance is like the most watched thing outside of a couple NFL games this year. So it's been lean, no question about it. Evan.
Yeah, I would say it's been interesting to see, I guess for me, all the other little things that make sports special, the tailgating, the gathering. I think about the New Year's Day games coming up and kind of got excited about, hey, I'm gonna watch some games. Maybe I can get together with, oh wait, we can't really do that. So it's just, okay, I'll just, watch them at home, not in a group. Like what fun is that? But yeah, I think I'll appreciate more just the little crowd nuances of a game, a buzz when a Nebraska runner breaks free, the grumbling of a third down gone awry or a bad special teams play, when you can feel that tension all the more when a crowd is there. But I think from a kind of personal experience sort of thing, it was interesting because I guess I got used to the empty stadiums when it came to college football games after probably the second week. But the part that never really felt normal to me was going on the road and staying wherever we might stay downtown and having hotels be totally empty, going to Purdue or going wherever and knowing that in a normal year, we'd be staying an hour outside of town for $150 a night. And in this instance, we're in this ghost town of a hotel for like $80 and nobody else is there. And it's just, I never got used to that. Never got used to being able to go to the stadium with no traffic, parking up close. It was just weird. It didn't feel right. And so, I think that was something. And then, you guys probably have similar stories, but I look back and think, okay, the last thing I covered in person in March was Nebraska's Pro Day, right before they shut everything down. And then I think I did maybe 2 in-person interviews since then. I went to a summer, a college summer league baseball game for a feature. And that's kind of about it. It's all been Zoom. It's all been over the phone. It's been really weird. It takes a lot of the, I think, joy out of what we do. It takes a lot of joy out of consuming sports. And, I agree with what Dirk was saying about the Dodgers. I mean, the Dodgers and the Lakers win titles this year, and it was just like, it was just kind of a thing that happened and you move on. So I think if nothing else, I'm going to appreciate more the communal aspect of sports and how that enriches really everything about it.
Yeah, no question about it. It was a tough year for the city of Omaha for multiple reasons. Obviously, losing the NCAA tournament was tough. Losing the College World Series was tough. Omaha Public Schools didn't get to play football. Well, that's not true. They chose not to play football for reasons that I think are disputable. And then 2 incredible icons, not just sports icons, but 2 of the most prominent people to ever come out of the city of Omaha, Bob Gibson and Gale Sayers, died just a couple of weeks apart. And Dirk, you know those 2 certainly better than Evan or I do. Is there, because of the pandemic, was the impact of their loss muted in some ways? Like, was it just, it wasn't what it would have been otherwise in the North Omaha community and the Omaha community at large?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, it's I found that with losses of so many people, whether it's COVID related or not COVID related, you're just not able to honor those people in the way that you ordinarily would. And Gibson and Sayers are such a prominent example of that. I mean, I think, Bob Gibson was a bit of a hermit, but I think he would have been celebrated to a degree far more than he was publicly if it would have been allowed. And I think Gale Sayers even more so, not just in Omaha, obviously, for those guys, but, Chicago for Gail and St. Louis for Bob. And so that was really sad that Omaha didn't get to sort of publicly recognize those guys and their legacies in a way that they would have had they passed away a year ago or maybe a year from now. So it was that is a big takeaway for personally for 2020. I mean, those guys have been battling health problems for a long time, right. But for them to pass away, basically a week apart is almost eerie, because they are undoubtedly number one and number two all time among the state's greatest athletes.
No question. Yeah, it was. I imagine, I don't know what would have been done for Gail Sayers, but I have to think Bob Gibson would have had the 1,000-person funeral, right? Like, it would have had every Cardinal who was still alive and that played with him, and every Creighton official imaginable would have been there. Every single person in the community who had a role in anything over the last 40 years would have been there. I mean, it to me, it felt like something that was just robbed from the community, because I think you're right. That Gibson, was unique. And anyone who's read your book knows, that he's unique in the way that he sort of regarded the world. And he had retreated quite a bit, but man, after he passed, he wouldn't have been able to control that. And, there would have been, I think people finally would have been able to, show him all of the love and affirmation that they probably always wanted to, but he kind of kept it at arm's length. And I don't know if it's just sad. Like, it's really unfortunate, because I think Omaha should have been able to celebrate that better. I'm not a big college World Series guy. I live in Lincoln. I like taking my kids to it, but I do feel like that is sort of the city's festival, and the city festival didn't come to town this year. The NCAA tournament's very cool. It only lasts 4 days. The festival lasts like 14, and it's just a warm family atmosphere. Anybody can go, because it's not $100 to get in. And I feel like that's a bonding time that Omaha just lost. They just lost it.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to spread this too far because I know we're talking about sports, but it's just so representative of what I think all of us felt personally. I mean, there was just this sense of isolation all year long. You just felt like you were missing big things over and over and over, whether it was, high school graduations or weddings or funerals or, it was just a sense of missing things, missing big moments. And obviously, that first Nebraska football Saturday, I think was just a gut punch for everybody. When so many other programs across the country were playing and Nebraska wasn't, that one really hurt. I mean, I think losing the Wisconsin game, the game that was, that was not even supposed to be open to fans, but the event was supposed to happen in Lincoln. And it just, I don't know. It certainly will make you appreciate it, but some of this stuff, I don't know. It'll be interesting, you guys, and I haven't fully fleshed this out even personally, but I do think once you kind of get out of these routines a little bit, I do wonder if it's harder to get back in them in the same way, to be devoted to the experience in the same way that you were before. I hope it means as much to me as it did before. I think in some ways it will mean more, but I think in other ways, part of me might say, I didn't do that. I was okay. I can live without it. And I wonder if others will feel the same way. I mean, take this Nebraska football experience, for instance, which has been just, ingrained in our routines every Saturday for 60 years collectively as a state. Will people will it mean as much to people? Will they embrace it as much as they did before? I think some may more, even more so, but others I think might say 2020 was sort of a trial run, and I lived without it, and I kind of liked going out to Fontenelle Forest. So I don't know. It'd be really interesting to see sort of the long-term impact of some of this stuff, not just on the Huskers, but on sports in general.
Yeah.
No, it's a great point. It will be really interesting. And, I agree. I just feel like there's this sense of like things that never happened. Like somebody was going to win the College World Series championship this year, and we're never going to see who that was. Some kind of memorable moment was going to come out of the NCAA tournament here, and we'll never get to know what that was. The recruiting process, how different could Nebraska's recruiting class look if guys had been able to come to campus this year?
It's fine.
I know, I agree it is, but how
it's
different?
Better.
But just all the what ifs. I'm a big what if guy.
No question.
I love looking at a singular event and seeing. I think that's one of the great things about sports. What if this one play went differently? What if this one thing happened? Well, we have this massive event in this pandemic, and it's sprouting off just almost unlimited amounts of what ifs in so many different aspects. And some of them are big, like Dirk's talking about with routines and things. Some of them are small, like where a guy's going to go to school or what's the impact of missing a game. And it's something that we're just going to not really know for many years to come. We're going to have to chronicle this. And, it comes down to roster management, scholarship distribution. You can get into the minutia, you can get into the big picture. And it's a year unlike we've ever experienced, and hopefully unlike we'll ever experience again.
Yeah, I certainly hope that. So there's a beat to life. College basketball is going to just play through the pandemic. We don't know how the vaccines are going to turn out. We don't know that for sure. We'd love to say that we know for sure, but if there's anything that we've learned in 2020 is you just don't know everything you want to know the minute you want to know it. And so, but I think we can feel pretty confident that college basketball is going to play out during the pandemic. And the beginning of the NBA is obviously college football season will end that way, and the NFL will. But the calendar in sports always kind of resets right after the NCAA tournament. Golf really begins again in earnest. You have the Masters, and then you have Major League Baseball. And that's sort of the sports calendar, the sports year is different from the actual calendar year in that the sports year kind of begins in April. And then it ends, oddly, the following June when the NBA finals are over. So it kind of ends. It starts with the Masters in a lot of ways. Major League Baseball's right then. Then you have the calendar, and it's like a 14-month calendar. It's very strange. This year we'll have the Olympics, which I think will be very well watched if they're able to pull it off. My hope is certainly sports does come back. My hope is that movie theaters open again, and that people are back in the movie theaters watching whatever stupid Avengers movie comes next. I don't know which one it is. And here's why. Not just because of some sort of Pollyannish reason that I like those things, but when you don't have an American culture that has largely been built on some of these extracurricular things. We export culture around the world in ways that no other nation does. It's probably the thing the United States does the best. If we remove that and we create that vacuum, I'm not sure I love what goes into it. And I'm not sure that some of what went into it is some of the things that we saw this year that were almost wholly political. And I'm not sure that that's necessarily where we want it to be. Like, Dirk, I understand what you're saying. Like, yes, it'd be great if people did replace their college football consumption with like trips to Fontenelle Forest. My sense is that some of the consumption of culture was replaced by hours and hours and hours of argument and debate over political issues, large and small. And in the absence of an election year, I wonder how many people will return back to that well to haggle over, I don't know what. but not an election. So that piece to me, and I don't think that's making a political comment other than just to say that I think our culture generally works much better when the hallmarks of it, like entertainment, like sports, like concerts, man, like live music, not in a studio, not in like socially distanced, but 10,000 people in an arena of all different kinds of people, like watching something. I went to a WWE thing, I think right before the pandemic with my kid, because Sammy likes it. And it was just so cool to go to that here in Lincoln and have, literally every economic strata there. Like the only thing that brought all those people together was WWE, like, and that's what a concert does. That's what a sporting event does. Everybody can agree on, the Chiefs are probably the most popular team in professional sports at this point. Them or the Lakers. And, the Chiefs just bring everybody together. I mean, everyone can agree on Patrick Mahomes. And so those are good things. And I hope that returns to some sense in 2021, because I don't necessarily I think what would fill the vacuum in lieu of that is something more divisive than sports and entertainment tend to be.
It's a great point, Sam. I mean, the petty arguments this year were something that I hope we never have to deal with again. I mean, just the insanity that people experienced on a daily basis. I'm not talking about important substantive debates. I'm talking about stupid crap.
Oh yeah, and there was a lot of petty arguments, and that I believe in doom scrolling. Like I believe that people do that, and I'm not trying to suggest in any way, shape, or form that the pandemic is an enormously important and that COVID isn't. It's very serious, and we've lost more than 300,000 lives to it. But I do think you can get sort of in a stasis where you're doing everything you can to protect yourself and others from the virus, and yet you're not particularly moving. You're stuck. And I think people have gotten at times stuck in that place. I mean, I certainly pray for everyone around the world. There's only so much that this one fat guy can do to shape the course of the pandemic in, say, Germany. There's days when you can basically find out what's going on with the virus in every nation in the world, and there's only so much one small human being can control there. And I do think culture getting back into things does help to move us away from that sort of feeling of that infinitesimal feeling that we can feel like infinitely small in the face of something, globally awful.
Hey, let me ask you a question, because my wife and I had this discussion recently, and I'm curious what you guys think. When this whole thing opens up, whenever that is, what's the event? What's the activity or event? You can be as general or as specific as you like that you look forward to re-engaging with. That you weren't able to do the last 9 or 10 months. My wife said going to church. And that's a good one. That's for a lot of people. I can relate to that too. I said something less honorable. I said, I can't wait to go to a high school basketball game with 3,000 people in a gym, and they lock the doors. I mean, so I'm curious what you guys are looking forward to. I know for a lot of people it's concerts and Husker games, but is there something that stands out?
Go, Evan.
Yeah, I mean, first thing I think of is just game night with friends. I
knew you were going to say that.
Did you?
Well, I did. I thought you were going to say poker, though.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, I used to have a monthly game in Lincoln with a bunch of guys, and that died in the last year. And That's no fun. But my wife and I have different couple friends that we play games with, and we've had to do virtual sessions, which is okay. But, it's kind of like sports. It's just been kind of a shadow of what it was. So those are a couple, private things or personal things, I guess. But professionally, man, I miss covering games in person. Even the College World Series. Like, I think a lot of years, some years, it feels burdensome, and it's like, oh, well, all right, we got to kind of grind through this thing in June when most college writers are on vacation. We're here kind of doing our duty on this. But man, I think it sounds great right now. Let's have a June grind. Sign me up for 10 days and all the notes and whatever come with that. So those are a couple that come to mind for me.
Yeah, Mary likes Nebraska women's basketball, and she can't go. That's the bottom line for her. She's not able to go to the games. I can, and may very well go tomorrow. What the hell? But she can't, and she can't go to the high school games. I probably could have screwed around and tried to sneak her into a high school game and sit there on the bleachers by herself, but that would have sucked. She can't go to the games with her friends. Same with my son. So yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, Dirk. High school, like, I am going to church, but God can basically go down every hallway he wants, right? So like, God goes into the living room. The one thing you can't bring into the living room is the high school basketball atmosphere. You can't bring that there. And that is, I was thinking about right before the pandemic ended, I went and watched Hunter Salas play Donovan Williams. This was like late February, I think. And Mary went with me, and I can go see Hunter Salas go play a basketball game if I really want to. But my daughter's reaction to him was different than mine. Like, her reaction to watching him was special. And I would like her to be able to experience that again. Because she'd never seen anybody in person in high school that good. Like, when he went in for a follow-up jam, her reaction, I can't duplicate that for her. Only on TV. So I'm right there with you, Dirk. That's exactly the first thing to do.
It's funny because, and by the way, I would put the state tournaments in several. Basketball would be my state tournament, but I know for a lot of people it's track and field, it's wrestling, it's
right.
So I think the state tournament is a really big one for a lot of people that man, I would love to do that. It's funny though, as an introvert, and a lot of writers are introverts, but there are certain events where you really kind of look forward to the energy, where you can't replace it somewhere else. And I think live music is that for a lot of people. I mean, they crave going to concerts and feeling that rhythm in their veins. But man, it's something about an indoor sporting event for me, where it's loud and it's just people are on top of each other. And I sure hope we can get back to that. I miss that. I know college basketball, Creighton Huskers, there's a lot of great, big time games. And there's just something about the indoor atmosphere of a sporting event that I really, really miss.
PBA is worse, is stranger than Memorial Stadium. I can say that with great confidence. And beyond that, I think they should stop the crowd track at PBA and just go with whatever ambient noise there is in the arena. Because the crowd track doesn't help. It makes it weird, and it's actually kind of annoying to me. I think they would be better off just making the noise with the guys on the bench. I think it would be more valuable. But we'll leave it there. 2021. I don't think it's going to be easy. It's going to be more of a we just don't know yet exactly how it's going to be. I think you can certainly play the event. They've now figured out a way. There's more certainty around the virus, to where you're going to get an NCAA tournament. You're going to get a College World Series. What it all means And whether people can gather and be together, we don't know. We'll just have to find out. But as it relates to college sports, each guy in the Nebraska football program got a free year of extra eligibility, as did everyone else. And as a result, they can come back for another year. And thus far, no one has announced they're coming back. The players who have announced that they're leaving is Brendan Hymas, DiCaprio Boodle. Bo Wilson is transferring somewhere. I would have to think FCS, something like that. Maybe some other place, but we'll see. And Jack Stoll. Evan, you're sort of one of the guys on the senior watch here. I'm not going to think that any of those departures surprised you. Which ones of the remaining ones do you think is important they return?
Oh, I mean, JoJo Doman was the one that comes right to mind. He has a skill set that Nebraska otherwise doesn't have on the defensive side as a guy at the outside who can drop into coverage. We saw that quite a bit, and who can also rush the passer, set the edge. We've talked a lot about how Nebraska has not been able, for whatever reason, to get a lot of traction getting in outside linebackers, finding those guys through recruiting or even the portal. So bringing him back would be big. If they can get somebody back in the secondary, I think that would be really key too. I mean, we saw Boodle is moving on to the NFL. But if one of Deontay Williams or Markel Dismuke decide to return, I think that would go a long way in kind of shoring up that secondary. But I don't know. I mean, beyond that, I don't see a ton of those guys returning. Maybe Ben Stilley. He was somebody who coaches at the end of the year said his best football was in front of him, and who has really kind of figured things out, I think, in the last year. He might be one, but I think a lot of the other guys, in my opinion, just kind of looking at the situations, are probably moving on. Matt Farniok is probably off to the NFL. Dedrick Mills is someone who I guess is still kind of 50-50.
That's the big one.
Yeah.
I thought he would have announced by now, and he hasn't, which
I did too.
I think favors Nebraska a little.
I did too. I mean,
we'll see.
When he said it after the Zoom, I mean, he said a few days, and that would kind of lead you to believe after the Rutgers game that he was ready to go. But maybe that's not the case. And as we know, they don't really have an established successor there if he does decide to move on. So, yeah, I mean, I think those three would go a long way, would be Stilley, Doman, and Mills. And it's been kind of interesting, hasn't it, just to watch that process? I mean, usually you're seniors and you're done, you move on, and that's that. But we're seeing seniors not just at Nebraska, but everywhere else making these decisions. And I think it's been kind of interesting because oftentimes I think fans, and maybe we, even as media, just kind of assume they'd love to stay, but their time is up, and they have to move on. But really, a lot of these guys, they've been grinding. They've been playing football their whole lives. And either they're ready to get paid in the NFL, or they're ready to say, okay, maybe I'm not a pro guy and I have, put my body on the line for a long time and I'm ready to stop. It's been interesting to see that decision put in those guys' hands as opposed to it being assumed just through eligibility.
Well, you and I, because you've talked to me about this, Evan, that I assume what you just said. I assume that most of the guys want to get out of here, not because they don't like Nebraska, but kids want to move on. They're adults now. They want to grow up.
It's a great point. And I, again, like you just said, my assumption, my assumption was that, that this is such a part of life. And I'm not saying my assumption now, but I think growing up and even in my 20s, my assumption is that, these guys just want to hold on to this eligibility as long as they can. And then it's funny, you get to you realize that there are stages and seasons of life. And even if you have that eligibility, there's sort of these natural transitions or natural breaking points. And I think you're seeing that with some of these guys, and you will continue to see it around the country that, certain athletes just, they reach sort of a natural end of the line. It would be an interesting social experiment to just remove eligibility requirements entirely and just let guys play as long as they want to play and see how see how long certain guys do it, because you might have some guys who stayed in college into their late 20s to play, but I think more likely you'd have guys that just realize, okay, 4 or 5 years is enough, and it's time to move on and start my adult life. So,
or their coaches would decide that for them. That's actually a really interesting. I've never thought of that, but I think that they might. I think they should try to explore that. What that would look like. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
Because I think especially as NIL rules come in, I think it would be helpful. The one thing is, after a certain date, you can't play for anybody else other than the school that you're with. That'd be the only stipulation I put in. So like you can't be a quarterback who plays for 6 different schools in 6 years. Does that make sense?
So who's a guy that comes to mind over the years for Nebraska? Like, who's the guy that you envision holding on for 10 years as a college player? Like, anyone jump out at you guys?
I think Zach Taylor could have played quarterback for Nebraska. Zach Taylor or Joe Ganz could have played quarterback for Nebraska for a long time. Yeah. I mean, imagine Joe Ganz as the quarterback in 2010, 2011.
Joe Ganz.
That's a good team.
That is a great example.
That's a good one.
If Joe Ganz is the quarterback of Nebraska in 2009, Nebraska may be playing for the national championship. How's that?
Well, you might be stretching that one a little too far.
Really? Am I?
I think, to your point, Joe Ganz.
I'm not sure I'm stretching that. They lost by 1 to Virginia Tech. They lost 9-7 to Iowa State. They lost 13-12 to Texas. The only game where they didn't play well at all was against Texas Tech. And if you give me Joe Ganz in that game, I might take Nebraska. I think they're probably playing for the national championship. Quarterback was the issue that year.
I think this is a different discussion for a different day.
I know.
I think history has been a little too kind to Joe Ganz.
I don't know, I don't know if it's been too kind as it relates to 2009 Nebraska.
No. We're in full agreement on 2009 Nebraska, yeah. but you got to remember, Joe Ganz was doing a lot of his damage against pretty weary Big 12 defenses in a season in which Nebraska's. Nebraska was playing a lot of garbage time offense. So
can you imagine, though, if Zach Taylor or Joe Ganz were able to play for the 2009 and the 2010 and the 2011 teams? Woo, that's pretty good stuff there. Those are different teams. And that's no knock on Taylor Martinez, but those are different teams because those teams had skill. I mean, those teams had a lot of skill.
Yeah, I will.
Taylor couldn't always take advantage of, but you give Zach Taylor like 3 years with Niles Paul. I like that party.
An
interesting thought.
It may just have been because it was the peak of my professional interest in Nebraska football, but. The timing just might have been right, but I will maintain to my grave that 2010 Nebraska football team was the biggest opportunity of the last the post championship years, even more than 2009. I just thought 2010 was the year where it was all sitting on a platter for Nebraska, and I agree. I think as good as Taylor Martinez was, there were a lot of other really good pieces that could have benefited from a Joe Ganz style quarterback.
Yep. That would be the answer, Evan, is somewhere is like quarterback play, quarterbacks.
Yeah, he didn't get
obviously that Nebraska, I'm sure, would have taken Tommy Armstrong would have played college football for a while. I think Tommy loved playing college football, and he was pretty good at it. So Tommy, he could have played in 2017. They'd have been a better team if he had, all that stuff.
That's true.
All right. That's good. Mills is the big one. So Mills is the one that if you don't get Mills back, you're looking at come on down Gabe Ervin, who just had a nice game in the state title game against Georgia. Yeah, against Georgia, in Georgia, Tuesday night. And let's look in the transfer portal. It's not that I've seen enough of the other guys, but I feel like I have seen enough of one of them. But another one can't appear to stay healthy, Tompkins. I think Marvin Scott has a role within the program, but we'll see. I do think he's going to be a pretty good player. And then we know nothing about Sevion Morrison because he got COVID and was, I don't know, hurt, other things. So last year was kind of a lost year for those running backs outside of Mills, but I still think you're looking transfer portal. And there's some guys in that portal, including Isaiah Bowser, who are pretty interesting to me. You need a physical presence in this offense, and Bowser would be a possibility, I think. Whether he'd come to Nebraska or not, I don't know. How good of a transfer destination is Nebraska? I tell you, it's good. It's good on all of the, like, the facilities are great, NIL support, great food, good gear, all that stuff. But how is it good in the other ways?
Well, just look at, we now know the destination of the 5 2020 signees from Florida who went elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
I mean, these were guys who were all highly touted, and where did they end up? Toledo, Maryland, Florida Atlantic, UCF, and Florida International. That's not overwhelming, right? I mean, I think a lot of Husker fans look at that and say, why would you go to those schools? Because there's no tradition of winning, and maybe there's no, there's no whatever internal support or whatever you want to call it. But it does. I mean, it speaks to, I think, a lot of different things. It speaks to the power of being closer to home for some of these guys. It speaks to the power of, maybe they're more internalized or selfish motivations. Maybe it's playing time. Maybe it's relationships. But yeah, I think kind of the idea or the perception that Nebraska is an upgrade over a lot of those schools has slowly been kind of chipping away over time. It's kind of eroding a little bit. So I don't know. The transfer recruiting in the transfer portal is always interesting, right? Because these guys don't kind of broadcast it. It's not put out on social media. We know that they're in the transfer portal, but kind of the dialogue that goes on is usually very private until they announce, which is different than high school recruiting and things like that. So, yeah, it's. I think it's not maybe as fans perceive it to be, kind of in the big picture.
You guys,
they don't want you to know. Go ahead, Drew.
You guys cover this stuff so well, and I just, I'm speaking with some level of ignorance here. I'm really interested in recruiting trends. I'm not as interested in, individual recruits, but I do wonder if this last 9 or 10 months and the experience with the Florida guys, leaving, if that will cause some reflection in the North Stadium complex in terms of who they pursue and where they emphasize, and if this class does turn out to be pretty good, which had a more local flavor to it, does it lead them to to sort of double down on the Midwest guys and say, hey, we're going to have to do this without the 45th best prospect in Orlando?
Yeah, well, I mean, I watched the Georgia State title game last night, and I mean, it's just unbelievable because, you can watch the state championships in Nebraska and Iowa, and there are always good players. But, man, in the Georgia game, the third string running back for Buford had offers to West Virginia and Colorado. And it's just like every player that did anything in that game had multiple FBS offers, it felt like. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if you're Nebraska, it makes a lot of sense to hammer home the regional aspect of things. And I've said on here before, of all the attrition that Scott Frost has had from his first few classes, none of them have been from what you would consider Midwest states. They've all been coastal or from the South. And so that would limit what's been a problem for Nebraska for a few years. So I think you have to get to a degree. You have to see that Iowa has a generational type class coming out. You have to see that Nebraska and Omaha in particular are generating talent greater than we've seen in a while. But man, it's tough to pigeonhole yourself and to turn away from some of those places overall, because it's just so talent rich. And I think if nothing else, you have to do what Scott Frost said this season, which is take a closer kind of character evaluation and say, is this guy somebody who can come to Lincoln, Nebraska from halfway across the country, look at a different culture change, look at all the adjustments that have to go into moving halfway across the country, and will they be in this thing for the long haul? I think that's a big part of recruiting that maybe wasn't that way even 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, you have to figure out why. For example, DiCaprio Bootle just declared for the NFL draft. DiCaprio's from Miami. I would examine, maybe even have a conversation, an hour-long or 2-hour-long conversation with DiCaprio, who is probably more insight than anyone about this. And I'm trying to get on the show. Okay, tell me about you. Tell me why you came here, why you stayed, and what helped to keep you here. And I think then you can say, all right, well, when we go to these to places around the country and we're recruiting, what kept Markel Dismuke, Deontay Williams, and DiCaprio Bootle at Nebraska? All right, now let's look for those qualities. Now, it's not perfect. I get that. But you can learn a lot from the guys you have in the program who did stay and why they stayed, and recruit for that. Because I'm guessing that there is a difference between the kind of person and the kind of mindset that Bootle had coming here and Jaden Francois. I'm just guessing that there's a difference. And Nebraska did not release Jaden Francois for a reason. I think there's a little bit of something there of like the way that he left and how he left. Nebraska was not going to let him play for UCF this year. And it may have had something to do with UCF kind of refusing to immediately release Noah Vedral years ago. I don't know, but it's notable, and I think you have to look at that. I would say that there's probably a twofold issue. The first is you've got to figure out why guys left, and ask yourself, are the players that we're recruiting from that area necessary for us to do X, Y, and Z as it relates to defending the pass in the Big Ten? I don't know. I'm not sure if I believe that. I'm not sure you have to recruit defensive backs from Florida and Georgia to defend the pass in the Big Ten. Maybe you do. As it relates to getting receivers and having the sort of speed quotient that you need to play football the way you want to offensively, you may have to. Or you need to get Avante Dickerson and, from West Side and turn him into a receiver because he's fast. Marcus Fleming is not, in my opinion, a great football player. I think he's a good football player who's an amazing athlete. And I think he was recruited for his speed. He's got extraordinary speed, and he was recruited for that. I wouldn't say he's, Steve Largent or Anquan Bolden in terms of running routes. Can you find a commensurate speedster who can give you some of the qualities that Fleming was going to give you without having to go through the diva-esque behavior that he put him through? I mean, it's no question he did. They put up with some stuff with him before the season, I think. And then he left. He just left. So, I think there's these things that they have to sort of ask themselves about the necessity. I've said this many times before, and I will again. The track record of being able to successfully recruit kids from California offensive and defensive linemen from California is low. Nebraska's had very little success doing it. And so expensing too much energy for a guy that you can get in Missouri is probably a little bit of a, waste of your time. Now, they got Jalen Weaver, who is a unique player from California. He's 6'8" and 330 and looks way better than his recruiting ranking. So I have a little arched eyebrow about that. Why is this guy coming to Nebraska? Is there some sort of qualification issue there? Do you feel like if you get him here, he's going to be special right away? That kind of thing. Like that's because rarely, they went after Foster Sorrell a couple of years ago. I remember Mike Riley doing that, and they fell short. He was a 5-star who went to Stanford. And then on signing day, Mike says to us, well, we found out he really liked Stanford his whole life, and it would have been good to know that. And I'm like, anybody could have told you. They haven't recruited West Coast offensive linemen at Nebraska in 20 years, Mike. Like, I mean, I wrote it like 5 times. Like, they're not going to come here. Mm-hmm. Big fat guys, big guys. They don't want to when they grow up in warm weather. They don't want to come to the cold. They never do. So, it's those kind of things over time that I'm sure Nebraska will figure out. And then as it relates to the quarterback, you go anywhere you have to. You go to Canada, you go to Europe, you go anywhere you must to get the best quarterback for your system. And of all the recruiting questions that we ask, I still think that's the one. Are you getting the very best player, the very, very, very best player you can get for your system? Are they the very best? Not, we can make this guy good because he can't really throw, but we'll teach him how. No, can you get the very, very, very best player? The player who, if you had to play him as a true freshman, they could go win you a game. That's the kind of quarterback that Nebraska has to get. Wisconsin doesn't need to get that guy. They don't need to get that guy. They don't. They got all the other crap. Chase Wolf, Danny Vandenboom, John Von Trapp. Any of those guys can win a game for Wisconsin.
I think you made up like half of those names, Sam. I don't even
the last one. At Nebraska, you need Spencer Rattler. How do you get him? And can you get Spencer Rattler as a 3-star? Can you get Kyler Murray? How do you get him? How do you get him here? You have to find a way. And if Adrian Martinez, I think Adrian has a lot of those qualities. Do the guys after him have those qualities? I don't know. How do you get them? You got to get the very best player you can get. And I think that's a question that Scott is going to work through is, guys, do we have the very best quarterback that we can get? Because it's going to take the very best. It's not, again, you want to be with Iowa, Wisconsin, then you're going to have to run Iowa and Wisconsin's system. Because if you can't, the reason Iowa and Wisconsin can play Nate Stanley, who was cut from an NFL team, or, Chase Wolf or Jack Cohn, is because of the system they run. But Nebraska doesn't run that system. Nebraska runs a system where Drew Brees would be good. So get him. How? Do you have him? If you don't, how do you get him? How much better was Miami this year because of De'Aaron King? A lot better. A lot better. Without him, how good were they? They weren't. They were bad. They were like 3-6 bad because their defense stunk. So, you got to go find the guy. That's the biggest recruiting question to me. Have they found the guy? If not, how do they find him? How do they get him? How do they get a guy that they don't have to coach up for 2.5 years?
Well, I was just going to say, Sam, I mean, that's part of the equation, right? Is like, if you're going to go get that guy, you pretty much have to assure him that he's going to be the starter when he steps on campus.
Sure.
And that means at this point, that's a complicated question because you have like 8 other quarterbacks on campus, all on scholarship. So,
sure.
And I'm exaggerating, but Nebraska has such a glut of quarterbacks, none of whom appear to be the type of transformational player that you're talking about. I think it makes it a little bit challenging to go get that guy. and the risks that you take if you go get that guy and say, hey, it's all yours, buddy.
I'm not saying that Logan Smothers isn't, and I'm not saying that Heinrich Harburg isn't, or that Luke McCaffrey isn't. I'm saying that they know what they've got in Adrian, and Adrian has been better than the other guys that they've had, but you know what you have in him, and it's possible that as a senior, he turns into that player. He turns into Joe Burrow. It's always possible. I mean, Joe Burrow wasn't Joe Burrow until he became Joe Burrow as a senior. So it's always possible that Adrian Martinez becomes that player. Maybe he had a Joe Burrow-esque final half of his junior year, and as a senior, he becomes Joe Burrow. And I'm not going to say it's not possible. But I am going to say that, like, that's the question they have to ask themselves. Do we have the very best quarterbacks here? When they go play Oklahoma, in what, week 2, week 3? Because they play Illinois and then Buffalo and then Oklahoma. And Spencer Rattler goes out there for Oklahoma, and he has to play because Rattler can't go to the NFL yet. And Spencer Rattler's out there. Are you telling me that Nebraska's quarterback's as good as Spencer Rattler? And maybe he is. Maybe Adrian Martinez outduels Spencer Rattler that day. But tell me that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the question, right? Like, you're going to go play the team that you want to become. They want to be Oklahoma. I mean, they could whatever. At the end of the day, Oklahoma is the closest thing to what Nebraska can become in college football.
But
what Oklahoma does is what Nebraska wants to do. So when they go play Oklahoma in the next 2 years, do they beat them? Do they come close? Do they have a quarterback who's commensurate to the guy Oklahoma has?
But I mean, I think that's part of it. But part of it too is what if you put Adrian Martinez on Oklahoma's team and started him? Like, how much better would he be there? Probably quite a bit better, I think.
He probably would.
Because he's going to have receivers that are going to get open, because he's going to have an offensive line that's going to hold up for him. He's, So I think that's part of it too. Is like,
well, it is and it isn't. I don't think he's Kyler Murray. I don't think he's going to go start for the Cardinals.
Deshaun Watson's killing in the NFL, but he has no support. So, like, it's
you know what I mean? Like, Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray started from day one in the NFL. They were pretty good. And Joe Burrow is pretty good. Like, these are pretty good players. But I don't know that Adrian's going to start as a rookie.
Wait a second. The whole Joe Burrow argument 2 years ago, or even a year ago, was that he wouldn't be any good at Nebraska.
That Adrian was going to be better, and that it was better to invest in a quarterback who is going to be here 3 years instead of quarterback who is here 2. I'm just saying that when Evan says it's possible that Martinez would be better at Oklahoma, yes, that's very true. That's very true. I think that's actually quite likely from a statistical standpoint. That would happen. I think that's accurate. Simultaneously, Oklahoma's last 3 quarterbacks are starting as NFL rookies.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how Jalen Hurts is doing it. He's a great guy. Jalen Hurts is a great human being. I don't know that he's going to be a long-term NFL starting quarterback, but the last 3 have. And that's actually not true of Clemson or Alabama. I guess it's true of Tua, but Mac Jones isn't going to start as an NFL rookie. So Oklahoma knows what it's doing there. I'm just saying that Nebraska's going to play the team that it probably, although it won't say that, kind of wants to be like, but only in the Big Ten. They're going to play in the next 2 years. And so we'll have a very direct comparison as to how far along Nebraska is in that journey. I can tell you Scott Frost could take over Oklahoma's roster and probably do just as good, if not better than Lincoln Riley has with it. If you want to do the swap that way, don't you think that if Scott Frost took over Oklahoma tomorrow, they'd probably have had the same record or a better record than they did this year with Lincoln Riley?
Oh, I don't know. Lincoln Riley.
I do.
Scott Frost is like, what is he, 12 and 12? I don't want to get into that, but I mean, don't knock Lincoln Riley's success.
I'm not knocking it. I'm not knocking his success. I'm not knocking it. In fact, I deeply appreciate a coach who's able in succession to successfully recruit Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, and Spencer Rattler. Like, That's part of his success. That's part of what makes him good, is that he was able to draw those players here to Oklahoma. But I'm saying that if you just you could forget Scott Frost, take Coach A. I don't know, whatever coach you want to take. Take Jeff Brom and put him in Oklahoma this year. You think Oklahoma is going to lose 4 games instead of 2? I don't. But it tells you what Oklahoma has done is they've built a really good roster, and they've got the players, and they got 5 stars all over the place, and they got a quarterback who's great and all that stuff.
Yeah,
they benched him for a half, even Spencer Rattler. They benched him, but then they brought him back, and and you look at the end of his season, and he's been really good. They've coached him well too, but the guy came to Oklahoma billed as the next Patrick Mahomes. And he's got a great arm. He's got a 70-yard arm, all that stuff. So the question becomes, the quarterback question to me, when it comes to recruiting, the biggest question is still that position and whether Nebraska's got the right guy to do all the things that Scott wants to do. I don't know.
I agree with everything that you're saying, but I do find myself, because in the Joe Burrow, Adrian Martinez argument a year ago, people would say, "Wow, but Joe Burrow wouldn't be Joe Burrow at Nebraska, and if you put Adrian Martinez at LSU, he'd be great too." And the point there was, look at the surroundings, and I always sort of argued that okay, that's true to a degree, but Joe Burrow is the best player in college football, and he's going to be the number 1 draft pick, and so clearly there's some sort of gap between Joe Burrow and Adrian Martinez.
We just didn't know what the gap was at the time that Joe was making the decision. That's the problem. But Ohio State didn't know. Urban Meyer picked Dwayne Haskins over Joe Burrow. Urban Meyer was wrong.
I want to argue it from the other side, though, that Nebraska, this offense would look. I mean, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. They basically played the 2020 season without wide receivers. I mean, the insanity of that. Well,
sure.
they
Wendell Robinson's a good receiver, but yes, I get you.
But he's more of a wingback than he is a wide receiver.
This is true.
And Oklahoma is running out CeeDee Lamb and D.D. Westbrook and Ryan Broyles, and Nebraska needs to find and develop those type of players that make the quarterback job a hell of a lot easier.
They do. No, I totally agree. But that's the question: is can Nebraska draw CeeDee Lamb and D.D. Westbrook? Those guys weren't there this year, but they had good freshman receivers at Oklahoma this year. Can they draw those players? And then can they get the quarterback? Can they get those players?
And if they can't, I think the question becomes, how do you adapt if you're Scott Frost? Because part of what made Nebraska so great back in the day was that they ran the option, and not a lot of teams did that. And so they were able to get players that were more suited to that. And they weren't necessarily going head-to-head in recruits' living rooms for all the 5-star guys. They weren't going head-to-head with Ohio State and USC and whoever else. And so right now, if you want the best quarterback, you are going to have to, at some point, beat out those top-level teams. You're going to have to beat out an Alabama or a Clemson or somebody, because everybody wants those guys. And so, yeah, obviously plan A is to get those guys. But if you don't, then what? Are you stuck in perpetuity, just, taking that second level guy and struggling to average seasons? Or do you find another way? Wisconsin and Iowa, for as much grief as they get from Husker fans at times, they don't have to have a top level quarterback, and they do pretty well. So I think that's the next question is, if you can't, then what? How do you adjust?
Nope, I just want to reset. I know we have to move on, but I just want to reset what the expectation was 3 years ago at this time, because I talked to a lot of people, in Scott Frost's orbit. I didn't talk to Scott about it, but their expectation was that if Adrian Killens, a lightly regarded, essentially a glorified track sprinter, could be a great player at UCF, that Scott would be able to get not only guys like that, but also the higher level guys and bring them to Lincoln and essentially supercharge what was already a pretty remarkable offensive scheme. And that's what the expectation was 3 years ago. And I think, looking at it through that lens, it's really surprising that Nebraska has not been able to generate better skill position players than they have. And that, obviously, recruiting is a part of that, but development is also a part of that. And as Evan just said, man, if you can't get Adrian Killens to come to Nebraska or guys of that caliber, it really makes you, I think about whether this scheme can work.
I agree. I think the expectation 3 years ago when Scott took the job is that no matter what, the offense was going to be fun and it was going to score points. I think that was probably the biggest thing. Is, because remember when he came, what was the biggest question mark? Shenander. I said, well, Shenander? Is he a Cosgrove? What is he? But it wasn't. That offense? I don't know. You think that offense is going to work? That wasn't the question. And what has it turned out to be? Shenander's the most solid hire he had. And I know people dog on Shenander, and that's fine, but I'm telling you, he took over a defense that had zero confidence, zero talent. Well, not zero talent. Not a ton of talent. Had 19 different coaches in the last 3 years. He took over one of the hardest situations in college football when he took over that defense. I mean, those guys weren't on the same page. They didn't even in the same book. So what he's been able to do over the course of 3 years to get them to meet, okay, is a significant achievement. Scott Frost took over an offense that didn't suck really ever. I mean, it didn't suck under Bo. It was pretty good at times under Riley. I mean, it was. I mean, they had players, and it's gotten worse. So, that's the piece. That's the thing you got to try to figure out. And people spend a lot of time dogging on Shenander without appreciating. And this is where being a beat writer helps. And Evan knows this, and you know this too, Dirk. We know what they took over on defense, and we saw what they had dealt with for years. So we know what he took over, and what he took over was a bad situation. Frost did not take that over. He on offense, they had Morgan and Zigbo and Spielman and Maurice Washington. I mean, they had players. They had good linemen. They still do. Hymas is an NFL lineman. They didn't, so why they've gotten worse. And we've spent a half hour talking about Nebraska's offense, which is why it's fun. They got to get better. They got to get better on offense. Have to. Speaking of offenses, all four teams in the college football playoff have great offenses. You notice how it used to be defenses won championships? That's not the case anymore. Remember when Oklahoma won the national championship 14-2?
Sam, even more recent than that, LSU Alabama 2011.
Yeah.
I mean, the identity change in that conference is just mind-boggling.
It is.
I mean, 10 years ago, every SEC homer from Charleston to Baton Rouge couldn't stop talking about SEC defense. And now nobody plays SEC defense. And they it's like a political argument. It's like being a deficit hawk where, you're pounding your fist into the desk.
Yeah.
We got to get control of the national debt. and then 10 years later, you're like, writing the $5 trillion stimulus package, and you got your name
park
on
all over the place. Yeah, that's right. That's great.
I mean, it's like that league. What has happened is just absolutely stunning, and it just confirms what you were just talking about, which Nebraska's got to fix the offense. If for no other reason than everybody else at the top of college football has just absolute elite offenses.
So it's Alabama against Notre Dame and Clemson against Ohio State. The Clemson-Ohio State matchup is the third such matchup since 2014 in the college football playoff alone. I think people are getting tired of this. That's just my hunch.
I don't think either semifinal is going to be particularly competitive. That's just my opinion too. And so what? We're on track for another Alabama Clemson. You know, and you throw in the pandemic, you throw in, championship fatigue. It just it's not very appealing. And I think it's interesting too, from a Nebraska perspective. I mean, they haven't been to a bowl since 2016. It feels like the college football playoff, those weekly rankings, all that feels like a million miles away every week. Like, I'm aware that they happen, but it's had no bearing on Nebraska for so long that it feels like just this totally separate league, this totally separate thing that's going on. And, you know, people talk about it all the time. I think that they should expand the playoff. I think 8 is a good number. I mean, that's a whole different discussion. But, yeah, there's definitely fatigue. The pandemic doesn't help. And you know, here we are. I don't know. I don't have a ton of enthusiasm for it. Do you guys?
No, I'm not. I have no enthusiasm for it. I think I'll watch the Notre Dame Alabama game is one of those. It's one of those events that I think you check in midway through the second quarter, and if Notre Dame is, you know, within a touchdown, maybe you start watching it. But it's almost like Notre Dame has to prove that they're not going to get blown out before it merits your attention. Ohio State, I think, you know, last year, I think I made the argument that was the best team not to play for a national championship in the post BCS era. I thought that Ohio State team was just phenomenal, and I think if they played Clemson 10 times, I think Ohio State would have beat them 6 times. But this Ohio State team doesn't seem quite at that level. I don't think this Clemson team is quite at that level either. But I suspect that Clemson is slightly better, and then, you know, it sets up a Clemson Alabama rematch of the rematch of the rematch. But I'm with you, Evan. I think one way to spice this thing up is to make it more inclusive. I don't think an undefeated college football team. I know Sam disagrees with this, but I don't think an undefeated college football team should be left out of the playoff, regardless of whether it's, you know, Cincinnati or Coastal Carolina or whatever. I think the point of this thing is to eliminate the what ifs scenario as much as possible, and that means making it more inclusive. And frankly, I think it's just stupid. If you're the commissioner of the Pac-12 conference, for instance, that you are supporting a system that annually leaves your best team out of the playoff. So at some point, from a revenue standpoint and just a way to spice this thing up, I think they need to go to 8 as soon as possible.
Agreed. I'm looking forward to the playoff games because I like watching Alabama. I like watching them. I won't lie. I hate the New England Patriots, but when Tom Brady was their quarterback, if you love football, you like watching New England Patriots. You just do, because they're great. I like watching the Green Bay Packers, even though I hate the Packers with the heat of 1,000 suns. Because you can't not watch Aaron Rodgers and go, that guy's great. Like, you just can't do it. He's having maybe the greatest season that he's ever had, and maybe the greatest season anyone has. And it's ignored because it's the pandemic and whatever. But Aaron Rodgers is playing at a level right now that is obscene. And you have to watch it, just like Mahomes. You got to watch it every week. Like, you're just like, it's like watching, if old Bill Shakespeare was around and you got a chance to watch him write a play. You just got to watch it. So I'll watch Alabama because I appreciate watching Alabama. And then Ohio State Clemson, I think, will be a good game, but we'll see who wins. The disappointing thing I think of this year is that a lot of the bowls downstream are really poor. Oklahoma, Florida moves the needle. I'll watch that. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. A 45-41 extravaganza, but holy crap. After that, give me a break with Texas A&M, North Carolina. No thanks. I couldn't care what happens in it. I expect North Carolina will win. What do you got? Cincinnati, Georgia. Oregon, Iowa State. Yeah, I mean, so the games downstream are just not very good, and that's the real casualty this year. Is the bowl games haven't been very good. I mean, Oklahoma yesterday, Oklahoma State Miami was an interesting game, and the story from the game was that the receiver for Oklahoma State left the game at halftime, either because he wanted to or the coaches told him to, and nobody really knows. And the whole story after the game is the quarterback for Oklahoma State telling the critics that they need to go through him to go to the receiver. It's just stupid. You know, that's like that Seinfeld meme where he just gets up from the theater and he's like, it was that exact same thing for me. I'm like, this is just pointless. If the game itself can't even be the story and some guy that leaves at halftime and nobody knows why and whatever. So to me, it's just a really disappointing group of slate of bowls. I'm going to give you a chance to pitch this here for a second, Dirk, because it's in direct contrast to 1970, because we're going to finish the 1970 series. Nebraska won the 1970 national championship. And what happened on that final day? Final days? There's multiple days, right?
No, it was just one day.
One day. But the poll didn't come out right away. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, there was a 2 or 3 day lag between the Orange Bowl and the polls, which is why you saw a lot of politicking between Notre Dame and Nebraska after the fact. But we're going to commemorate the 1970 New Year's Day in Friday's paper. So look for that. We're going to have the game story from that Orange Bowl, and I'm going to have a kind of a look back at the craziness of that entire day that led to Nebraska winning its first national championship. The story of that day wasn't so much Nebraska beating LSU. It was the other events that, paved the way for Nebraska to rise to number one. And, I don't know whether it's the, Dan Jenkins of Sports Illustrated writing about it or what, but I find myself drawn into that world because you really have to be, I think, a certain age or older to appreciate just how crazy those old New Year's days were, where you had, the best teams weren't playing each other, so you didn't know who was gonna rise to the top. There was a lot of unpredictability, and I'm certainly not arguing that was a better system, but you did sort of get wilder, New Year's days because you had kind of good teams were scattered all over the map as opposed to all in one place.
'Twas a better system.
No, it wasn't.
Was.
No, it wasn't.
Was. It's the only system that could ever have delivered BYU a national championship.
So let's fix that, Sam. Let's add 4 teams to the playoff. Let's get, Cincinnati in the mix.
Cincinnati's not beating Alabama on any day of the week.
Nobody thought BYU was winning the national championship in 1984, and they did. So
they didn't beat Washington or Oklahoma to do it. They didn't beat anybody good. Like they beat Michigan, 6-6 Michigan in the Holiday Bowl to win the national championship.
So wait a second. You just argued that was a better system, and then 5 seconds later you just said BYU didn't beat anybody. Which is it?
It didn't. Well, you're assuming that I think the best system is the one that follows analytics, and it's not.
I would assume that you think the best system is the one that identifies the best team. Is that not true?
Well, you can make as big of a system as you want, and Alabama's still going to be the best team almost every other year. Whatever system you want to develop. Doesn't matter, because college football is structured as such. There's no salary cap, and the bigger the roster, the more it favors the same teams over and over. And 1 or 2 players cannot change the outcome or trajectory of a tournament the way that the Miles Simon and Bibby did that one year for Arizona. Or Connecticut wasn't even good that year, but they won that. Kemba Walker. You can't do that. You can't do it. It doesn't work that way. So you don't get these special generation of groups of players who shape a season. You just get the same really good teams over and over and over again. You can, and look, again, we talked about this years ago, Dirk, when I said the problem with the playoff is it's going to diminish everyone else's accomplishments outside the playoff, and it's going to hurt the bowls. And that, I've always believed that. Now, you can expand the playoff to 16 teams. That's fine. Guess what? North Dakota State's won how many in a row in FCS? I mean, they've won like 8 of the last 10. Why? Because they're North Dakota State. Why? Because they're a school in a state that doesn't have any other like FBS teams. And so a lot of the kids that they recruit are just better players. They have better facilities, all this other stuff. So it's not like the FCS is like, the FCS has a playoff and the same stupid team wins it every year. So it's not.
Okay.
If Alabama's going to win it every year, or Clemson, the same teams are still going to win it. You can expand it to 16 teams, but nobody knows who the 16 seed was that lost by 32 to North Dakota State. Nobody knows. Nobody cares.
Okay, I feel like the arguments are all over the map at this point. I think the point of this, the emphasis should be on identifying the best team, not making sure that the 9th best team feels a little bit better about its season than it did before. But if the measurement of satisfaction truly is in all these places, did you make the playoff or not? If we are going to emphasize the playoff and it's playoff teams only, then let's expand the playoff.
I agree.
Because if you lose in the quarterfinals, look at the NCAA tournament. The question at the end of the season is, did you make the tournament or not?
Right.
Do you feel good about your season? Yeah, we made the tournament.
Yeah.
Nobody cares if you lost in the round of 64 or the round of 32. It was, did you make it or not? So let's do that with the playoff too. Let's expand it. Let's make it big. Let's make it inclusive. Sure. And at that point, you do have more programs that feel better about their season. And I don't care about the Peach Bowl. If there's not enough attention on the Peach Bowl this year, and 10 years ago, the Peach Bowl was a bigger deal, man. And now nobody appreciates the Peach Bowl. I don't care about that. I care about identifying the best team or the best teams. And I think expanding the playoff basically checks all those boxes.
Sure. As it relates to the best team, it's going to be Alabama, Clemson, or maybe Ohio State or LSU in a gun off here. Still the same team.
Not necessarily true though, Sam, because
as it relates to a very specific team, it will.
That's okay. Part of the reason that Alabama and Clemson are getting all of the players is because they're in the playoff every year.
Right.
So if you expand it where USC is also in the playoff almost every year, they're going to be, they're going to have just as good of an argument to get those types of players away from Nick Saban. So
fair enough. USC can be added to the,
or Oregon, or Georgia, or
Georgia. It's all fine. I'm just saying the only system that we've ever had that will ever give BYU a national championship is the one where a bunch of reporters voted him in as the title.
But that's
the only way it'll ever happen.
That is not a good thing, Sam. We should not hold on.
It's not a bad thing for BYU.
We should not hold on to 1984 and say, darn it, let's get back to a system where you only had to win the Holiday Bowl to win a national championship.
Why not? They're the only ones who, forever, for now and forevermore, they get to say they won a national championship. What's wrong with that?
Heck, let's give Northwestern the national championship this year then. Who cares?
Well, BYU won every game, right? And Oklahoma went into the 84 or 85 Orange Bowl, number 1 in the country. They lost to Wisconsin because their schooner tipped over on the field.
Washington
lost one game that year to a team that I believe BYU beat.
It wasn't Wisconsin. Who did Oklahoma lose to?
Washington in 85.
Yeah, you said Wisconsin. Okay.
Oh, sorry. It was Washington. They lost to Washington. Washington lost a game that year, one game, I believe, to a team that BYU beat. So
we are deep in the weeds right now. Like it is, we're so deep we can't even see out.
And then I think Texas lost. Somebody lost in the Cotton Bowl. Like, it all fell the same way it did in the 70 game. Like, BYU did not go into that day expecting to win the Natty. And then I think what happened was, they had, like, everything fell their way. But the point is, the only way they were able to do it was to get it voted that way. Like, that was how they pulled it off. Like, they would never win all those games.
It was such a bad system. Stop nostalgia. Stop going down that road and putting the nostalgia on.
It was a great system.
It was not a great system.
Well, the only thing that was what was not great about it, that they didn't earn it, or what?
That there was no reason to it.
The best teams didn't play each other. That's like the essence of sports.
And I think the other thing that year, if I'm not mistaken, is that Florida was not allowed to play because they were banned. So Florida was like the number 3 team that year. So Oklahoma was number 2, and Washington was number 4, and Washington beat Oklahoma.
So would you be the guy who would say, hey, it's cool that Nebraska and Michigan share a title in '97 because the debate can rage on forever? Isn't that cool? I would go the other way and say,
that's kind of cool, yeah.
Why don't they just decide it on the freaking field? They could have done that.
They could have, but they didn't, and so they both got one.
You like that?
I mean, I don't hate it.
Is that a better system?
I don't know that Michigan's got a problem. Like, who has a problem with it now?
I think we are back in, like, mock trial mode here, and Sam is.
We're not. No. We're really not. Like, I actually do. Like, I don't have as much of a problem with college football being the Gospel of John and just being completely different than anything else. I really don't have a problem with that. Like, I'm okay with the weird pageantry system, this sort of hokey, colloquial, non-traditional, without a structure system. Like, I don't have a problem with that.
You are definitely in the minority on that.
Well, I mean, yeah. So is anybody who likes jazz music, I guess, because it doesn't have a melody. Like,
gosh.
It doesn't always have to adhere.
That's the most elitist thing you've ever said.
It is. I don't know what to tell you, but, like, it doesn't have to always be. Like, I love the fact that the NFL has a structure where the Washington Eagles game matters on Sunday, even though Washington has no business being in the NFL playoffs. They're going to be if they win. I love that. It's quirky. It's strange. It's whatever. I love the EPL system where the bottom teams get relegated.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, it's cool because it's Europe. It's okay if Europe does it. So, like I like that about college football. I like the uniqueness. I like the fact that there was something different about it, and now there's not. Like, it's just going to be the same. It's going to be just like the FCS. And shall I? I don't think you think it's cool because Europe does it, Evan. But I do think there's a Europhilia involved sometimes in approbating, certain sporting quirks in other countries. Like, we have this sort of like, oh, it's okay if they do it. We can't do anything other than exactly what we do. North Dakota State has won. Let's see. 8 of the last 9 national championships in the FCS.
So let me be clear. Your argument.
I like that kind of party.
Your argument is
8 of the last 9.
Your argument is that we stand a better chance of Alabama not winning a national championship by basically shrinking it and hoping that they lose a regular season game or 2, thus knocking themselves out of contention, versus them sneaking in as a 6 or 7 seed in that same scenario, and then they run off 3 wins against teams that are seated higher than them anyway because they're just more talented. You're saying it's more likely
Yes.
that we
That's
eliminate
exactly what I'm
Alabama by them, mysteriously losing to Mississippi one year and knocking themselves out.
Yes.
As opposed to letting them in as an 8 seed where, oh boy, we're really in trouble if they get in as an 8 seed.
Yes. Yes. I'm certain of it. The 2017 national champion was Alabama. In the old system, Alabama does not play for the national championship. Clemson plays Georgia. Georgia beats Clemson. Georgia's the national champion. Georgia wins its first national championship since 1980. Alabama gets into the thing. Alabama beats Clemson. Alabama beats Georgia at the end. Alabama did not belong in the 2017 playoff. They didn't even win their own division. So, yeah, exactly. That's precisely what I'm saying. Yes, that's my whole point. Yep. Alabama will make every single playoff. They will have a better chance of winning that playoff. The seedings won't matter. In fact, here's what I think will happen is once you expand the playoff, you'll have this group of, men and a few, maybe one or two women who know college football who are like, well, they didn't win their division, but they're still the number 2 seed because our analytics that we got from ESPN, who puts together this thing, says so. So they're the number 2 seed, even if they're 11-1.
We can agree on this point, Sam. 2017 was a joke, and from the start, I said you should have to win your conference championship to make the playoff.
Yeah.
When everybody determined that was no longer necessary, the system lost a lot of integrity, in my opinion. So, I think the conference championship should absolutely matter. But now that we've decided that it doesn't matter, they should expand the playoff.
Well, if I'm not sure the conference championship matters if you're trying to determine the best team, because we all know that there's been NCAA tournament champions who didn't win their own conference.
It's different in football. It's very
different because it's smaller. Sure, that's what I mean. You might as well just go to a completely different system, the one that awarded BYU the national championship in 1984. Why not? It was a good system. You had split national champions in 90 when Miami and Washington claimed the titles. That was 90. Was that 90 or 91? 90. Georgia Tech and Colorado. Do any of us think that Georgia Tech was the best team that year? No.
Colorado had a loss. Basically, they essentially had 2 losses.
Had a loss and a tie. Yeah. But nobody thought Georgia Tech was the best team in the country that year.
Tom Haas did.
They both got the titles. When is Colorado and Georgia Tech ever going to get a national title again? Never. Never. Those teams are never going to win it again. 91, Miami, Washington. When's Washington getting another national title? Never. Never.
Let's just
They're
start
never going to win one again.
Let's just start handing out participation trophies because apparently
what was wrong with it? It was great. What participation trophies? Come on.
I guess that's essentially what the bowls are. You want your Peach Bowl trophy to be displayed prominently in the lobby of every.
We've had fun today. My God, we had obviously a lot to. I had a lot to get off my chest today. I'm sorry that you guys have had to be the targets of this bio.
It's all good.
We only went an hour and a half.
Evan's like, oh my God, what did I get myself into?
No. And I just want to circle back real quick to 1970 because we did a lot of good stuff on that this year, I think. And I'm glad, Dirk, you're wrapping it up. But, the 71 team gets so much credit, and rightfully so. But that 70 team, as we've said before, really kind of helped Nebraska become what it has become in terms of expectations. And you talk about weirdness of college football. I mean, I didn't, before this research project, I didn't know a ton about that team, but my goodness, I mean, everything came together for 1970 Nebraska, not just the events at the end that we're talking about, but that they were innovators in strength training before anybody else was doing it. The fact that they just happened to have a couple of young local guys named Monty Kiffin and Tom Osborne around and handed them prominent roles. That team was a great story. It had a lot of great players. And I would encourage people that are listening, if they don't know about that team, to read up, because it really was what set Nebraska to become what it became. And it's just a really cool collection of circumstances that came together.
I would also say this, Evan. That's a great summary of the whole season. I would also encourage people. The World-Herald put out a great Devaney book. It's called the Birth of a Dynasty.
Yep.
And it was, I think, of the 25 books that the World-Herald has done over the last decade, I think that may be the most underrated, the one that sort of probably should have sold more than it did. I've spent a lot of time with it the last 3 months, and I'm so impressed by the design. The photos are just jaw-dropping. So I would encourage anybody who's interested in the 1970 project to pick up that Devaney book. It's kind of been lost in history a little bit, especially that 1970 season.
We also have a book out for Christmas too, the best games in Husker history, so people can watch that and look for that as well.
That's right.
I've rather enjoyed it. All right, we're going to end this because this needs to end. This needs to end. But we will end it with this. Here are the records of the teams that BYU beat in 1984. You ready? You ready? 3-7-1. That was Pittsburgh. Baylor was 5-6. Tulsa was 6-5. Hawaii was 7-4. Colorado State was 3-8. Wyoming, was this the Kelly Stauffer Wyoming? I don't know, but they were 6-6. Stouffer? I don't know. Sorry. Nope. Air Force was good. They were 8-4. I don't know if that was the D. Dallas Air Force or not, but yeah. New Mexico was 4-8. San Diego State was 4-7-1.
Has New Mexico ever been better than 4-8? Ever?
I don't know. You know, Bob Davie was down there. He's pretty good. Yeah. 6-5-1 for Utah. Utah State was 1-10, and then Michigan was 6-6. That team won the national championship. God, that's great.
Oh, that's the takeaway.
Well, I mean, why not? Sounds good to me.
How can you argue that and then say that Cincinnati doesn't belong in the playoff?
I didn't say they didn't belong in the playoff. I mean, if you have the
you
top,
have them in your top
four, you're telling me who the top 4 teams are, they're not one of them. Give them the national championship, but you can't say they're better than the other 4 teams. Does that make sense? It doesn't seem to make any sense. But it makes sense in my own mind. If you want to, like, for example, in 2017, I voted Central Florida as the number 1 team in the country after the season. Because here's what I did. I said, listen, either Central Florida is number 5, or they're number 1, or they're like number 27 or something. They're number 1, and the way that I said it is I'm like, I think UCF belonged in the playoff over Alabama. When Alabama won the national championship, I said, I'm putting UCF in number 1. Do I know if they would have beaten Clemson and Georgia? I do not. I guess maybe not. But I can only go based on what UCF had to do, and what UCF did was beat the team that won the national championship.
Can I throw a wacky idea? We're talking about bowls that don't matter and all this stuff. If there ever was a year where those group of 5 teams should have convened via teleconference or Zoom on December 21st and said, this system is crooked, it's corrupt, TV ratings are going to be down. What we can do to salvage this thing, at least for ourselves, is we're going to run a 4-team playoff where Louisiana plays Cincinnati in the first round and BYU plays whatever, Coastal Carolina. You could flip it around, and we're going to name our own little group of 5 champion. Forget, the Peach Bowl or the Cotton Bowl or wherever they're going to send us to play an SEC team that doesn't care. We're going to have our own little championship. I would have watched that.
I would have.
I think a lot of people would have watched that, and I think it would have been, a useful form of protest to the system that is clearly not serving those schools. So,
Amen.
I think this year was a little bit of a missed opportunity in that regard.
Me too. And on that, we end. We talk way more than I thought we would. Thanks for putting up with this, Z. Until 2021. I'm Sam McKewon with Dirk Chatelain and Evan Bland. Next week, we'll be back to talk about Nebraska volleyball with Lincoln Arneal, hopefully. We'll be covering the Huskers this year. For myself, for Evan, for Dirk, for Dirk's daughter, have a good New Year's, people. 2021. Let's hope it's a lot better than 2020.